Before we begin, I want to introduce myself and also do an accessibility check. We want to ensure the captions are working appropriately. I can see the transcript here. Sarah, are we good to go? All right, thank you. Now that our access is in place, I want to introduce myself. My name is Diego Guerra. I am the Community Engagement Coordinator at National Deaf Center. The National Deaf Center has been in existence for 5 years. We run on a 5-year grant cycle under the Office of Special Education Programs. And our goal is to help deaf people reach success after high school. This panel is mentoring deaf youth, which is such an important topic for us, as I know it is for you as well. This panel is being recorded so that we can share it on YouTube and on our channels so that those who couldn't make it today can view it later. We'll be introducing our panelists in just a moment, but first, I have a few reminders for you. If you're watching on your iPhone or an iPad, we do suggest you switch to a computer if possible, because iPhones and iPads have different features that may not give you as many options. So if you have the opportunity to watch on a computer,
recording stop, recording in progress.
Also, we have sign language interpreters available, ASL and English interpreters. We also have captions. You're able to push the captioning button to view captions here in Zoom. We also have 3 wonderful panelists who are joining us today, and they are going to describe their thoughts about mentoring, their experiences about mentoring, and how it's benefited them as deaf young people, and then how they see it benefiting deaf youth moving forward. 5 years has passed quickly, and when NDC was first established, we saw a lot of gaps, and one of those was definitely in the realm of mentoring. We have 3 wonderful panelists. Mentoring benefits everyone, regardless of who they are, whether they are just wanting to learn and connect with someone on how to navigate daily life, or for whatever reason. It's very beneficial. We often have many types of mentors that we can look at, but we always need more, and especially deaf mentors who carry multiple identities: deaf blind, deaf who are oral, deaf people of color, deaf disabled. It's important to reach more mentors and really match mentors to the youth needs. Okay, I see that all of that does matter, so make note of those details. We also have polling for the audience because we enjoy getting your participation. So answer the polls, and then if you have any questions, use that Q&A icon that's at the bottom of the window here. And we will look through those questions and offer the questions up to the panelists to answer. Now, we are limited to an hour, and we'll try our best to answer your fantastic questions you have for us. Okay, with all of that out of the way, I think we are ready to introduce the panelists. Panelists, can you come online, please?
Hi.
Hi, Dom. Hello there, Mark. Hi. We have one more panelist who's just running a bit late, but you know what? That's just fine. We can keep going. I will introduce the 2 of you who have arrived. First, I want to introduce Dominic Gordine from Philadelphia. Go ahead and introduce yourself, Dom.
Yeah, I'm born and raised here in Philadelphia.
Philly, right? I went to a school for the deaf, to PSD. And I also went to MSSD where I graduated high school. And then I came back to Philadelphia and recognized so many deaf youth are lacking resources. So I started working in mental health services with adults and then worked with young people. And I saw even more of a need for deaf youth. And just 3 years ago, we developed a mentoring program to help fill that gap. And we're still in development, but I also just have a lot of personal experiences supporting deaf youth, whether it's in their employment endeavors or just growing personally in their day-to-day life. And I have been supporting deaf youth for many years now. Well, this is Diego. Thank you, Dom, for sharing that. We're really happy to have you here. Now moving on to Mark Ramirez from New Mexico. Mark?
Hi, everyone. Hello. I'm here in New Mexico. I'm from New Mexico. I graduated from NMSD and I returned back to my home state, here where the school is, with the intention of giving back to the youth moving forward. And I'm happy to be here on the panel today as well and discuss the various mentor experiences from professional deaf mentors and early intervention along to volunteer work, side jobs, summer programs, nonprofits, camps, and so on and so on. I'm excited to share about mentoring and very excited to learn from Dominic as well.
Great. Well, I know Maggie, our third panelist, will be here soon, but thank you, Mark, for introducing yourself. Before we move forward with the first question, I would like to send our first poll question out to the audience. We just would like to get a pulse of who you are and what roles you currently play in this field. Okay. And this is Mark. Let's see who's here today. All right, this is Diego. Many of us, I wish we could choose more than one, because I know many of us could click more than one of these. So just go ahead and choose your primary role, even if you fit more than one.
This is Mark. I'm trying to vote, but I just realized that's for the audience only.
Okay.
I'm curious about the results.
Now, this is Diego. So 24% are teachers and instructors. Great. Second, I see a tie between, or actually a three-way tie between disability services professionals, students, and voc rehab professionals. Wonderful. Then I see 12% transition coordinators and specialists. That's such important work. We have a few community members. Good. Thank you so much for answering. That helps give us an idea when we're formulating our answers to really frame it to meet you where you are. So with that, the first question is, what made you interested in becoming a mentor? And what have your experiences looked like growing up and even through today?
This is Dominic. Should I start? I was first drawn into mentoring when I was about 13, 14 years old. I was mature for my age, and I had a big role with other deaf youth at the deaf school, Philadelphia School for the Deaf. My counselor suggested that I mentor younger boys. 3 years old is what they were at that time. And I really wasn't sure how to manage that. I just had no idea. One day I went and stopped by the classroom, introduced myself, and that student looked up to me. And it reminded me of when my younger brother looked up to me. And I thought, wow, this is an opportunity to do the same. I taught my brother how to sign, and we developed a great relationship. And I thought I could apply that here. And I realized that developing that relationship with someone who might not have coping skills, I could now lead them along the way to be involved in activities and programs there at school and really help them develop and thrive. And that had a huge impact on me. I saw a lot of young boys who didn't have communication at home with their dad, perhaps, or struggled to communicate with their family, and they needed that big brother role. And from then on, it stuck. I've mentored ever since. Moving on to high school, we had a peer mentor program. It was a little more facilitation, but it was very similar. At the high school, we had a lot of deaf students that were homesick and anxious, and I served as a support role. A lot of the students there sometimes had hearing loss, didn't know too many signs, so I was able to welcome them to the school as a home and to sign language by building a rapport. Then I realized I love working with youth. I love working with kids. And from then on, I have to say, I'm still in a support role, and it's been over 15 years now.
Yes, Dominic, that shows us that mentoring can be a two-way street. It's not just mentor to mentee, but that mentors learn so much from mentees as well. And those self-determination skills are so important. Thank you for sharing that. Mark, do you want to share? Yeah, this is Mark. I would add that, as I thought about that question, I'm the youngest of 3, and I have 2 older brothers. And I had younger cousins because I always wanted a younger sibling, but I never had one. But I had younger cousins, and I enjoyed kind of serving as a big brother to those younger cousins. And here in New Mexico at the School for the Deaf, I started school here in 5th grade. And that is where I gained a lot of experience in situations where I was able to work with other people, younger or older than me, collaborating with my peers. And the school community really is what sparked my enjoyment and involvement with the concept of mentoring. And I've been involved ever since in many different capacities. Mentoring both as a student, as a college student. I worked with youth leadership camp with the National Association of the Deaf for many years. And that really boosted my passion and my drive to focus on deaf youth through that experience. And then I became staff at YLC, and I grew through that. Like you said, those students really fed into me, and that mentorship experience doesn't even have to be a formal title. You don't have to be in a formal role as a mentor. You don't have to meet with those labels of mentee and mentor, but mentorship is just a process of supporting each other to help each other thrive. And now I work in the social work realm and am continuing those efforts there. And this is Diego, you're right. It doesn't have to be formal, but we do want programs and need programs to be established because we do know so many deaf young people are isolated in various parts of the country, wherever they live. And it would be great if they could have a place or a program they could come to find mentors. Mark, I'm curious, you mentioned having many different experiences with mentorship. What have you found most beneficial in the mentoring process? And let me know if I'm freezing at all.
Dominic here. I can see you okay.
Okay, this is Mark. Sorry, it's better now. It was frozen for me there for a moment.
Ooh.
Okay, this is Diego. Let me go back here. Do you have any specific advantages, or what are the advantages that you've experienced or that you see most from mentoring? Yeah, this is Mark. There are 2 things. That growth through the process of mentorship is such a big benefit. Like you had mentioned, it's a reciprocal relationship where the mentor may not expect to gain as much as they did. it's such a strong impact. And hi there, Maggie. Good to see you. Welcome.
Hi, folks. I finally made it. Sorry, I'm a little late.
Hey, this is Diego. No problem. That's life. So Mark is finishing his comment, and then we'll introduce you. Okay, Maggie?
Mm-hmm.
So this is Mark, just ensuring that we can provide mentoring services. I realize it's so important, and I always knew it was important, but I've seen that it's more important than I could have even imagined, especially right now, just to help deaf people toward their successful future. Okay, thank you, Mark. This is Diego. I am happy now to introduce our third panelist, Maggie Mackey. Maggie, would you like to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your experiences or anything else you'd like the audience to know about you?
Sure. Folks, hi, my name is Maggie. This is my name sign. And I'm born and raised in the Northwest, sort of in the middle of the East-West. And my experience as a deaf individual, being born deaf, I was also mainstreamed. I had interpreters in the mainstream program. And I hopped around schools while moving with my family. And growing up, I never felt left out. I always felt included because my mom, she's hearing. She taught me how to be strong, how to be a strong deaf person. I work as a deaf coach mentor with NorCal. That's a program here in California. And they recruit wonderful mentors to the program. And so I've had a great experience as an adult. And I am able to refer to very beneficial resources like Sky High. That's a brochure we use. Now, we don't adhere to everything suggested in Sky High, but we have added resources to it to make it more vibrant, more creative, and have more applications. My mom has actually witnessed Sky High and the progress that's developed from it. And it's very exciting to her that we have that resource and are able to share it. Before I had worked there, I had friends recommending that location. They'd say they would love you. And I like working with kids. I like identifying what needs are necessary. I like identifying how to give attention and share joy. And I did identify with that. And I identify with the students, which is why I took on that role and that job as a deaf mentoring coach. Let's fast forward a few years now. I'm a mother now. And everything changes when that happens, right? Especially as a deaf mother. And I look at my kids, they're codas with the C and the K. And from my perspective, I realize I need a hearing mentor. I really do. It was quite a realization. I realized I can't make all the decisions myself. I need to check in with someone about their experience. And there really aren't coda-only events. There really aren't any counselors for parents of codas. That's a gap. That's lacking. And I realized, well, deaf children also need deaf mentors. In my opinion, I think mentors should be provided the whole duration of a child's life, from 0 to adult. And so I reached out to my deaf mentors, who I refer to as a second mom, one in particular. And as my deaf mom, she has put in her name at KU, Kansas University. My mom studied there a while back. And she reached out and said, "Help, my daughter's deaf. What should I do?" And so at that point, my deaf mom, right, she saw my mother's request for help. And it was at a daycare where they provide services to deaf and CODA children. And they invited my mom to bring me in, and also any other children that might be hearing and have special needs. And they said, yes, we want more deaf children participating. And I was one of those. So I joined the daycare back then. And it was a boon to my mom to see deaf adults. And not only that, every individual that was there, right? It doesn't mean that we're all going to replicate each other, but it gives that necessary point of view. And we need to have that awakening, that realization that we can't expect all of us to be identical. And that when you work with children, there's going to be a variety. And when I work with parents, I identify that and I mention it. I say every deaf child is different. Every vision that a child has for themselves is different. And by that, I mean, one child might want to be a teacher, and another might want to be a fireman. Another person might want to become a doctor. And we can't negate the experiences and think that perhaps that coaching won't apply. But instead, we need to think of it as a seed that is planted and a resource that's provided. I caution parents all the time that things aren't going to turn out too close to that perfect vision they have, but we do have to work at it on a daily basis, and it can be fatiguing, but we have to think of the children's future. When I look back on it, I know my mom put in a lot of effort. She did a lot for me, and I'm very grateful to her for it. My mom's name is Ann Curry, and she directed a school for the deaf in Alaska. She was director there. She's now moved to Seattle, Washington. She's settled down in Seattle, and she's had that experience. And some people, when they meet her, they just think she's a hearing person. They don't know about her past. They don't know about her experience. But we have to remember to stand back. She has a deaf daughter. And people don't see me often, but I have to show up and prove them wrong. And then they realize that my mother used a deaf mentor for me. They sometimes assume that she just put me at a deaf school and really wasn't involved in my life. But that's not the case. Sometimes some people have intuitive feeling about what's right. And I'd say go with that, but incorporate American Sign Language. It makes it a much more richer experience and aids with literacy, which we know is important. The first time I went to high school, it was a new school for me. And I was told that I probably had a really low reading level. They didn't believe me. I had to spend 2 weeks in a class just to prove them wrong.
Right, right.
And we can't force kids to suffer through that. We want kids to self-disclose. I can read. I get this because I've had a deaf coach. I've had a deaf mentor. I have the experience. Mm-hmm. I can do this.
You're right.
And that's just from my perspective.
Thank you so much for sharing that part of your story and mentorship is, I'm glad it was so beneficial. It's beneficial for us, for all of us, to show us what we are capable of, to help us navigate through challenges and barriers when others may be telling us we can't do certain things. So that's such an important part of mentorship. And I completely agree. Let's move down to the next question. But before I do that, I have another poll question for our audience. This is Mark. Bring it on. All right. And let's see the results to that. Okay, I see 50-50. About half of you haven't mentored. And then about a fourth and a fourth have either volunteering or through a specific program. So how is it that you, panelists, approach mentorship whenever you're interacting with someone? What does that look like? It could be informal or it could be through a formal program, but what's your style and what have you noticed works well for you and for deaf youth in general? All right. Yeah, this is Mark. If you're ready, Maggie, go right ahead.
Thank you. I've noticed that hearing parents tend to criticize a deaf person's English, whether it be spoken or even in sign. But that is distressing to a person. I think parents need to hold off on that. Let their child express themselves first. And when I'm in a room with them, I remind parents to allow their child to freely express themselves. And if they identify a word that they want to help their child with, that they should hold off because they're going to interfere with the expression and throw their child off. We know that hearing parents quite often criticize their deaf child, and they sometimes want their children to speak perfect English. But that's not the aim. The aim first is to allow the deaf child to understand a concept, express themselves in ASL. It can be word for word later, but we want 3 different versions: an ASL version, perhaps a written version, and then an English version. We can even include a parent's version if you want for a 4th. And sometimes parents are afraid that working this way will impede a child's development, and that's not the case. That actually leads towards language deprivation. And if you want your child to be able to express themselves, you need to listen to them first.
You're right. That's so important. Mark? Yeah, this is Mark. Maggie, I know you talked about working with Sky High, and as you were sharing your experience, it really brings a lot of perspective to, I think about Eddie and that early intervention programs and opportunities for mentorship from a young age. And we could talk about that all day for sure. It's close to my heart, that mentorship piece. And again, I'm in social work, so that's so important to me. Drawing from my social work program, the emphasis is to meet a client where the client is. So where the same applies with mentoring, wherever they are in their journey, it's important to meet that person where they are, and that becomes your starting point, not where I think it should start, or not to make assumptions about where that person is in their life and determining that I'm assuming that this person wants to come from point A, where they are now, to point B. It takes time to learn that part, to know that person holistically, whether you meet them individually or with a group, but find out where they are at. How is it that they think about the world? What is their worldview? And that takes time. That's not a quick process. So I try to think of where that person is, and then start there and walk alongside them from that point. And that's my concept of mentoring. I want to be relevant to a young person. I don't want to just throw my ideas and throw my concepts at them. I want to provide something that's beneficial and address the fact that I need to understand where they are. And I was mentored before, and I know mentorship can be professional work. I've been in that work professionally, but approach it at that personal level. That's so important. And this is Dom. I had forgotten to add, it's important too, working as this is the interpreter. Crescenciano, do you want to take that?
Yes, with the youth group. Well, I just recently started working with this youth group for transition planning. And that typically requires an adherence to curriculum. But I notice when I do that, the youth won't open up. They're very reserved. So I've tossed the curriculum, and I've tossed that role. And I interact with students, and I say, hey, where are you from? Tell me about your background. Let's just chat. And that really works as an icebreaker. I know that sometimes in other programs, some are uncomfortable in opening up like that with the students. I don't have those reservations. Whether they be POC students or not, I just immediately warm up and they lose those reservations. And I'm not rigid. I talk about where I was born, where I grew up, and then I start talking about basketball and we bond. And then I start getting the questions about real life. And I don't worry so much about the role. Again, those people who adhere strictly to curriculum are going to probably be faced with resistance and won't develop those thorough relationships. They won't know their students' history. They won't know the background. A lot of the students I know, they say that. You don't know where I'm from. You don't know how I've grown up. And so I try to break that down. I talk to other coaches and other mentors, and I tell them, no, you need to break that down. I think it comes to what was just said, meeting the person where they're at. We have to fit into their comfort level. Excuse the interpreter, comfort level. And we have to meet them where they're comfortable. And that's what makes a connection.
Absolutely. This is Diego. From my experience, taking that person-centered approach when mentoring is important. Taking the time to listen, to connect, to build a trust and comfort level is so important. You've discussed what works well. Are there other things you have recognized that haven't worked well? Maybe not in terms of curriculum specifically, but something that you have seen that hasn't worked, understanding that one size doesn't fit all. What works for some may not for other. Any specifics you'd like to share, Mark? Yeah, this is Mark. I want to make sure I'm not freezing. I think the opposite of what I had said we should do is what doesn't work. We don't want to make assumptions. We don't want to decide how that person feels. We don't want to decide where they might be in their journey. I think making assumptions is the wrong way to start. Also, I think we try too hard sometimes. We want to do a good job. I mean, it's all with a good reason, but I see sometimes that we as adults, we try too hard, and then it becomes disingenuous. We don't meet that person really where they are and come alongside them. We try too hard and we make assumptions. I think those are two big mistakes we can make. Also, rushing the process, rushing into it to try to get quick results typically isn't going to work. Mentorship is a slow process. Okay, this is Diego. Maggie, did you want to add something?
Dom, you go ahead. Dom says, you go ahead, Maggie. Thank you. This is Maggie. I also notice parents expect us to use technology. So, okay, I've had to switch. I've had to make changes, and I've had to take on different methods and work differently and not stick to the old school status quo. I do provide options. When things don't work, That scares parents. Some parents are afraid to chat with me because I don't speak with my voice. Now I can, but that's the last thing on my list of priorities. It's almost insignificant. I prefer centering American Sign Language first. And if at some point it becomes very frustrating with parents, I'd have to say in the beginning, when I started working as a deaf coach, I started using my voice. And the response from parents was, "You speak so well. That means we don't need to use sign language. We can forget about sign language." And I had to redirect that line of thought and say, no, you cannot expect your child to speak first. You cannot expect your child to speak for you. And I say, I speak for my benefit, not for your benefit. And I make that the message is extremely clear to them. For example, if parents decide to have their child have cochlear implants or hearing aids so that they could hear better, that becomes a struggle and a pain point where they then decide to put their child in an oral program and dismiss deaf mentors. And that actually ends up hurting their child. But that doesn't stop me from reaching out to them and making contact with them. I continue to strive to develop a relationship and ask them if they still have interest. And I try to break the ice. And I tell them it's okay if they're thinking about heading in that direction. But best practices dictate language acquisition come first. And that they develop the bulk of their confidence in communication and language first. So that way they don't have weak language skills. I've identified that as an issue that I face with parents before we really get working together. Some parents are extremely resistant and want their children to only have cochlear implants. They ask me if I had cochlear implants. I respond yes. They ask me how old I was when I got them. And I realize that they are now making a comparison between myself and their child. So I've had to distance myself from that. And I say, personally, off the books, that was my choice. That was not my parents' choice. And I tell them that I was happy to make my own decision. And I don't want to tell people that I have cochlear implants or that I got them in school. I never mentioned it. I just socialized as I regularly would as myself. Whether it be cochlear implants or hearing aids, I don't identify those as my persona. Those are just tools that I use. And I often remind parents that I work with that they're just tools. Tools for their child to use. And then I ask them, do you want your child to be a tool? Or would you rather your child feel like a human with a full spectrum of emotions in life? And that's been my experience.
Great. Dominic?
And talking about what works, I'd say without a mentorship program, nothing will work for a deaf child. People often ask me, how does mentorship work? And I tell them, well, it starts with a program. And a program will work whether it be oral, hearing loss, deaf-blind, all the different facets of the community. There are methods for each to work so long as there's a deaf mentor involved. And without that deaf mentor, it just won't work. Because children and youth, they just don't know what to anticipate in life. And the kids I'm mentoring now are not the same as the kids I was mentoring before. For example, without a transitioning program, it's difficult for them to have a success. And then what I'm saying really is without a deaf mentor and without a program, there's very little chance of success for that deaf child.
Yeah, and to expand on that, as myself, as Diego, what does it look like when, you veer from a curriculum? If you have a curriculum in place, but maybe that person wants to experience something different, or maybe the person being mentored wants to take the lead on navigating a particular experience. Do you all have specific experiences with that type of idea that you would like to share, Maggie?
I can add to that. Sky High has several. We have MARK, Deaf History, ASL for Families, Index, and also referrals to tools that they can add to assist in their journey. Some kids have a preference for hands-on materials. And so we have a section that we can look to for that. Now we have a lesson plan, but we jump around. And we try to cover as much of it as possible. And also give them homework so that they can do these activities at home with their parents. For example, when we're done with the session, I will go ahead and review and check in and ask how the family feels about it. And I'll ask if they feel that this lesson has an application in their life. Will it improve a facet of their life? And when we meet again next week, we'll identify whether or not they still need to focus on this area. And then I'll put that on the back burner. I have an hour of prep. I prepare myself before meeting with the family. And I must say, over this last year of the pandemic, it's been such a challenge. None of the kids are paying attention, and it's okay. They have the ability to be distracted, but still catch some of what's going on in Zoom. And they could see what their parents are doing, and they usually follow along, so long as their parents are modeling it. I don't just drop everything suddenly. I tell them I realize their kids are in the background not paying attention, but I still provide them with activities for them to do. And I rely on them to update me the following week if we should continue on the area or if we should change strategies. Also, if there are any siblings in the family, I have notes about that in case they want to play certain games or be involved in some activities. And I provide them resources that they could use on a daily basis. And working that way, it's a lot more comfortable than not including those siblings, because we don't want their siblings to say, oh yeah, that's for my deaf sister, or that's for my deaf brother. We'd rather have them interact together with these activities and games. And a lot of the siblings are surprised that they could be involved and be a part of the activities. It's not always the parents that have to be involved. Our program includes siblings, which is very enriching and I think necessary, because many times in the deaf community, they're disconnected from their siblings. And also, fathers tend to be disconnected and uninvolved. Most of the families I meet are like that. I have to admit that. But a lot of times I'll reach out and I say things like, Dad, I know your role is different, but you can still be a part of it. Usually the response is, well, Mom takes care of this. And I redirect, Dad, you could be involved too. And I refer to the materials in Sky High again, because they have several activities that can be done. And I ask their parents to switch roles, and I'll put it on the father. And I'll say, let's have Mom have a break. And let's have you do this, Dad. Let's see how you would handle this. And when I do that, they get a sense of empowerment, or maybe it's a sense of being closer to their child. Regardless what it is, they bond more. But I find myself reaching out to fathers quite a bit.
Family involvement has definitely been proven to be an important part of mentorship in a child's life. family involvement will greatly increase the benefit there. Mark, did you want to add something? Yeah, this is Mark here. Research has definitely shown that family involvement is key. And along that same vein, I want to add, when we think about following a curriculum, I know it takes time, but curriculum, that you have to kind of adopt a curriculum personally and then make that curriculum meet that family or meet that person where they are. But one size doesn't fit all. That's why it's important, if we follow a curriculum, that we really know it well, so that we can assess where that deaf youth is in their life and make the concepts of that curriculum apply in a relevant way to that deaf young person. If something doesn't apply or it's way off base to where they are in their life, there's no reason to include it just because it's in the curriculum. Or maybe it's something that they could be ready for at some point, but they're not ready yet. And you have to follow a timeline that looks different than what is set forth in a particular curriculum. So I think the structure and the ideas that come from a curriculum are very beneficial, but I think we have to practice flexibility when it comes to using a structured thing like that.
This is Dom. I agree with that. I use part curriculum and part myself. And with those youth that don't have a father figure, I remind myself of when I was young and my struggles. And I step in and fill in that role. I'll develop the rapport, the relationship, and we bond. And that allows these youth to be better people. Whereas without that, I'd say they were somewhat lost. So I'm really here to provide that support.
Yeah, and this is Maggie. If I could add, in the work that I do, I don't worry about the cochlear implant or anything like that part of myself, but I really give myself, and families notice that. They notice that I'm not talking about or focusing in on the implant, or I tell families, this is my place. Like you had mentioned, the key is meeting a family where they are, where their child is, not based on the parents' needs, but based on that child's needs. The next step will be getting that child better connected to their parents. I have noticed that there are cultural conflicts of interest. I wonder if you have experienced that too. These cultural conflicts of interest, like feeling a lack of information, and you want to understand that family and their culture better so that you can better support their child, whether it's a young child or a teenager. Have you experienced cultural conflict when mentoring?
When mentoring adults, I've had some conflicts. And I had a situation where I had a couple from Syria. So they were a different culture, refugees, without any language. And they didn't have any sign language exposure. And they didn't have an understanding of how things work here, employment and so on. And culturally, we were so different. Muslim, I'm not. And there's a difference in how we interact between males and females with that culture. But I identified myself as a person that was there to support them with any of their needs. And once I did that, our relationship blossomed. We've become close friends. But I think it's because I met them where they were. I went to understand them, their culture, and their needs. And I was extremely sensitive to that. And I think that's critical. If you can do that first, things can move forward. I constantly receive messages from this couple for helping them acquire language. They now have employment. They have a network, whereas they didn't have that when they first arrived. And so cultural differences sometimes arise.
This is Diego. We have a question from the audience. They are asking for your opinions, panelists. should a mentor be your choice, or should it be something that's required by a school? So you want something that isn't harmful to their language, to their upbringing. Should it be required or should it be optional?
I think we've got to ask first, ask the children about what it is they're seeking in a mentor. So that way we can actually make a good fit. Otherwise, that's going to fail. If a person isn't happy with their mentor, they need to find another one.
You know, it's the same idea as an interpreter. You know how we as deaf people have preferred interpreters. We reach out to an agency and state our preferred interpreters. Some have it within the system so that they can match the interpreter to whoever they are with. The same could happen with mentors being matched to families. Like, I am Polynesian and I am half Welsh and half Turnkian, if the interpreter is saying that correct. So I'm when I am with a Polynesian family, they're happy. Hawaiian families are very happy to work with me because we share that culture. And often when I see Hawaiian families come across, I ask for permission to work with that family because I have some of that background knowledge. And that has worked really well. I'm able to meet with those families and do weekly check-ins to make sure that the comfort level is there. And if so, we keep going. We work with that student until they're 3. And it's been amazing to see them grow. This particular family I'm thinking about moved back to the island and moved back to Hawaii, but they were so happy to have me as their point of contact, so that we could have that shared culture. And we stay in touch via social media. Rules with social media and boundaries, we make sure we follow that, but we've stayed in touch, and I've let them know you can reach out to me at any time if you have questions. Some families use Marco Polo, which is an app for communicating. Hearing people will send audio messages, but Marco Polo is beneficial to those of us who are deaf. We can send messages to families. Families are busy. They may not have time to FaceTime. So Marco Polo has been a great app we're able to use really as an accommodation to work with families. And we've seen a lot of success with that. Okay, this is Diego. Mark, do you want to give your last comment? Yeah, this is Mark. When I think about requiring versus making it voluntary, I think if someone voluntarily wants a mentor, they're going to be more likely to follow through. They're more invested. In general, if you tell me I have to do something, I may be more resistant to it. At the same time, if it's not required, it's easy for people to fall through the cracks. They could be overlooked if it's not a required part of a program and it's voluntary. So access to information and resources is important so that then students have an opportunity to volunteer. So I think it's a tough conundrum to decide between the two. So I maybe it could be strongly encouraged rather than required. And again, it depends on the situation. Deaf mentors, when we think about cognitive development, language development, and the holistic child, we really have to look at that whole picture. And maybe we can't require it, but we can strongly encourage and make decisions from there. Also, the type of mentor is important, whether it is a professional mentor or someone who's volunteering. But that early intervention and getting that set up as early as possible is so important. Diego? Yeah, I agree. I can see how both have pros and cons, but each situation may warrant something different. Like Mark said, oh my goodness, we have 5 minutes remaining. I can't believe that. So I'm going to send out the last poll question to see kind of what challenges you've experienced through mentoring programs. Let's get that poll set up. we're ready to see the results. Wow, 50%. That's good. You were able to find a way to do it. So yeah, language, culture, all of that is so important. That's the biggest challenge for sure. I see 0% on training. Budget is a big consideration. Community support. Thank you for sharing your answers. Now we only have 4 minutes, so I'm going to ask our panelists to just give us one last nugget of information, one last thing you'd like to share before we wrap up. And please don't go yet. I have a few things that I want to share with you after this. So who would like to go first? This is Mark here. What I would want to tell the audience is find your strength, find your skill, and that, take some involvement in involving learning what your skills are, your personality type, what it is you have to offer. And I think from there, when you realize what you have to offer, you can really meet that student where they are. You don't have to compare yourself to other mentors who may be offering something completely different. Think about your strengths and your interests as a mentor. Maybe you aren't going to be a match to everyone. Maybe not everyone you're paired with is going to necessarily like you as a mentor. That is okay. What's important is that you be your unique self, use your strengths, and you will have a young person connected with you who really matches you and who you can meet where they are. So I encourage you to do that if you can. That would be my top piece of advice. This is Diego. Well said. Mark? Dom?
There is no perfect mentor. I should say that. It just doesn't exist. But I agree with what Mark said. Focus on your strengths, on your talents. Strengths, I think, will outlast your skills. We can offer young people skills, but if they already have a strength, let's say for math, that could lead towards engineering. And sometimes it's just about redefining what that is like for a child. And there is no such thing as a perfect mentor. If you're going to mentor, be who you are, work with your experience, and make sure you have the tools to be able to share that.
Thank you. Okay, this is Maggie. There's so much that I want to say, but growing up, I was always afraid of being alone. So I would tell the audience, you are not alone. We are here. We can support you in whatever it is you need. It's important to feel that inclusiveness, to feel that sense of involvement. And like what Mark had said, being yourself, be you. Don't try to, you don't have to be a Hollywood star to be an effective mentor. Those people can be examples, but they're not you. You can become your own star. So be the light that you want to see, and we want to be able to see you glow, because that glow, that enthusiasm is inspiring to others. And when you have that hunger, then you will be able to fill others. And it's so important in terms of supporting, being a support system, and we can be family to each other. And that's my goal, is that we who are in this mentorship work can be family. That while we're individuals, we're not alone. So don't let others break you. We can let the world know that, we're here, we're going to work with this other person, this young person I'm working with, we're here to protect you, to tell you you're not alone. And we definitely need more mentors. We need more. And I have, my second mom that I mentioned, and I call her often. And I feel like, again, we have that human connection because I have someone else who understands me. Even though I love my mother, it's so nice to have this second mom who is my mentor, who offers a different perspective. When my parents feel overwhelmed, that I can lean on someone else. So I would say to other parents, don't feel overwhelmed. Let a mentor join you in your journey, and you can walk through this together. And we as mentors, we realize that maybe we aren't a good fit for every family. So families know that if you get a mentor who's not a good fit, you can find someone else. I mean, we didn't just get off the ship. We're used to how things go, and we're happy to make adjustments and find someone else. And I know parents are overwhelmed and they feel alone and they feel like there aren't enough resources, that, maybe they don't feel worthy because there are such a lack of resources, or they feel judged. I want to empower you as families to realize that your child will grow. They are human and they can make these human connections, and it can start from birth through adult. I'm an adult now, and I'm still very grateful for the mentoring experiences that I have had. It means so much to me. This is Diego. Thank you so much for sharing. I want to thank all three of you for sharing from your experiences today, your thoughts and your opinions. Now we are past time, so we need to wrap up. If you need RID CEUs, we will be showing a code here in just a moment. If you have any more questions, please connect with us by emailing help@nationaldeafcenter.org, and they will give you the help you need. I look forward to seeing you again someday soon. Thanks again, panelists. Thank you to the interpreters and the cart captioner. We so appreciate you today. And thank you for all the participants here. We appreciate you. Bye, everyone.